Okay, we're going to look at some questions dealing with accuracy and precision, the types of questions you might see show up on a test or exam. So once again, accuracy and precision, we're going to be looking at understanding the difference between the two and determining the importance of degrees of accuracy and precision. Okay, the first question here says, which is an accurate location of the arrow? What you may notice is that the ruler here has two sets of units. One is in centimeters and one is in inches over here. Okay, our arrow is pointing to the bottom of the ruler, which would be our inches units. So that should automatically eliminate A as an answer, because A is in centimeters. So that's not going to work. Secondly, it's between 7 and 8 on our ruler. So that should eliminate the last one, 37 inches. So it's clearly not 37 inches. It's much smaller than that. So we have two options open to us. We can either have 7 1/6 inch or 7 1/4 inch. You'll notice that between 7 and 8, we're divided into 1, 2, 3, 4 tick marks. So we're divided up into quarters, essentially. The arrow is pointing to the first of these tick marks, so the first quarter. So our answer is going to be 7 1/4. The next question, we're asked to find the measure of angle XYZ. Now you must remember that when you're looking at an angle, one of the rays has to pass through 0 degrees at all times. Our angle here, or the ray YZ, sorry, in the angle, is passing through 0 degrees. That would mean that we have, on our protractor, we have two sets of units, one that are on the inside, one that are on the outside. 0 degrees would be the inside units in this case. So when we're measuring angle XYZ, we have to use the inner units. So we have here two options. It's either approximately 20 degrees or approximately 160. 160 degrees is on the inner units. So we have 160 degrees is our answer. Now that is an accurate answer, but we can give it a bit more precision. You may notice that the angle is actually a little bit larger than 160 degrees. The angle goes a little bit above the 160 degree tick mark. It actually looks more accurate, or more precisely, sorry, as about 162 degrees. So both of these answers are correct. However, the second answer, 162 degrees, would be considered a more precise answer. Okay, this is the last question we're going to look at. Karen's height is 4 feet 9 3/4 inches. First question is to round her height to the nearest inch. So we have to look at the inch portion of her height. Right here. We have 9 3/4 inches. So if we were to round her height to the nearest inch, 9 3/4, would it round up to 10 inches, or would it stay at 9 inches? Well, 3/4 is larger than a half, so we're going to get 4 feet and 10 inches. We're rounding up because 3/4 of an inch is larger than 1/2 inch. If I wanted to round her height to the nearest foot, I'm still looking at the inches portion. She's 4 feet 9 3/4 inches. So her options are either to remain at 4 feet, when it's rounded to the nearest foot, or to round it up to 5 feet. Now 9 3/4 inches is larger than half a foot, but half a foot would be 6 inches. So if it's larger than half a foot, her height to the nearest foot would be 5 feet. Okay, question C asks, do you think it's okay for Karen to tell people that her height is the answer in part A? Explain. Now Karen's height is 9 3/4 inch. 4 feet 9 3/4 inch. Normally, people wouldn't measure that precisely when they're dealing with their height. They would probably round to the nearest inch. So yes, 4 feet 10 inches would be an acceptable answer, because that is commonly done. It's commonly done that people would round to the nearest inch. However, she's 4 feet 9 3/4 inches. Do you think it's okay for for Karen to tell people that her height is 5 feet? Well, 4 feet 9 3/4 inches is approximately, this is not exact, but is approximately that much shorter than 5 feet total. That's a pretty significant change in her height if you were to turn that vertically. So normally you would round to the nearest inch. Telling someone when you're more than 2 inches shorter than 5 feet that you are 5 feet, well, I think you might be pushing the limits there. So I would say probably no, it's not acceptable. But again, you're pushing the limits. Someone might think that they can get away with it. I mean, it's not really that big of a deal, I suppose, but normally I would say that no, I wouldn't say that I'm 5 feet if I'm only 4 foot 9 3/4 inches. So to once again summarize this section of the course, accuracy tells you how correct the measurement is. Is your answer actually right? Precision tells you how exact the measurement is. Going back to question 2, we had 2 correct answers, 2 accurate answers. One was 160 degrees, one was 162 degrees. So even though both were accurate, the 162 degree angle was a more precise measurement. And finally, a measurement could be accurate but not precise. In other words, it could be a correct answer but rounded, something like the 160 degree angle that we looked at, or maybe the 5 foot measurement for Karen if we round to the nearest foot. It could also be precise but not accurate. For instance, if we go back to question 2, I could precisely say that my measurement, if I'm starting from 0 degrees here, using the outside measurements, I could say that I have a precise angle for angle XYZ of 18 degrees. However, even though that's a precise answer, it's not an accurate answer. So we can have things that are precise, but not necessarily accurate. We can have things that are accurate but not precise, and precise but not accurate.